Hi there, how you doing? If you're watching this video, then you're potentially thinking about the Pearl Lemon 500,000 word blitz. So I wanted to walk you through what's involved, why we do it, why it could literally transform the fortunes of your business, and also the hows of how we do it. So let's get into it. So you've got a context as to why this is an absolute game changer when it comes to the world of ultimately lead generation, whether that's traffic or inquiries or e-commerce checkouts, whatever it may be. So let's get into it. So Google loves content. Okay. It seems obvious, but I think that sometimes that gets lost with the growth that we can see across the many channels that relate to inquiries. Google's quickest way to determine the topical authority, the relevance of a website is the surface area that that website covers. Okay, so that means how much content around a particular area is a website covering, and the more coverage, the more ultimately opportunities to rank. Think of it as like you trying to catch ultimately flies that are buzzing around, and your spider web is ultimately trying to cover a land area the size of Texas, but your spider web is the size of a swimming pool. So imagine one swimming pool in Texas and you thinking that the swimming pool or the spider web that you've got covering Texas is going to reach places as far as Alaska or Antarctica or the Arctic or Argentina or Andorra. It's just not going to happen. So the quickest way that we can make sure that the spider web or the swimming pool that you've got in Texas is going to gain as much coverage as possible is by expanding the size of the spider web or the swimming pool in this analogy. That's through content. That is through content. Now, the content that's produced needs to be written for humans, okay? There's been multiple updates that Google has released that relate to content for humans. So if we look at the helpful content update. Here we go. Helpful content update is one such one is Google searches are becoming more helpful. So it's content that is written ultimately to provide real world help. And one of the ways that you do that is producing ultimately content that is made for humans. Okay. There's a helpful content update. There's the Google Eat update. Okay. The Google Eat update. Eat and YMYL is another area. Tell visitors who you are. Work with experts to curate content. Make the purpose of your content clear. And here we go. Update content regularly. And EAT stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So this is another element that outlines why the content production process and the creation of it is so important. To that end, I'll quickly just jump into this article here from Search Engine Land, and it talks about ultimately Google's algorithm updates. So given that Google is ultimately the premier search engine in the world for anything that relates to commercial inquiries, these are the things that really do become powerful. And you'll notice a theme. Panda, back in 2011, duplicate, plagiarized, or thin content, user-generated spam, keyword stuffing. So this is an update about content. That's number one. Okay, let's go to number two. It relates to backlinks and over-optimized anchor text and spammy or irrelevant links. This is something that if you're working with us on SEO, is something that we would already be covering. If you're not working with us on SEO, then it's something that we should absolutely consider covering. The next one is Hummingbird. Look for it again. Low quality content. Okay, let's keep going. Mobile, it's mobile usability. Again, something that we can help support with, unless your web development team have already got that covered. So we keep going. Here we go. Rank brain, lack of query specific relevance, shallow content. So not enough content depth and breadth, and then not enough relevance of your content to the specific queries. So again, it's content. Medic update, we've just seen some elements to that. Lack of authority and weak EAT signal. So who are you? What do you stand for? And how trustworthy is your content? Okay, that's the medic update. Then we got BERT, once again, poorly written content, lack of focus, lack of context. The core updates, this relates to ultimately just updates in general, so we can skip that one. And then we've got the helpful core, the helpful content update, which we just described. So basically, Google loves content for humans. All of this content is massively important, and producing good content consistently is difficult, right? Think about just the production of even a video like this. There's time, there's effort, and there's energy that's involved. So these are the things that are really important from a content perspective. Producing content at scale is hard. So producing good content consistently is difficult, okay? Because we all know it, we all mean to produce it, but it's a real challenge, okay? If you've got content production down, producing content at scale is really hard. So when I'm talking scale, I'm talking lots of content, okay? One of the big tropes, or one of the big things that you often see in the world of content production, is that people talk about skyscraper content, people talk about writing long form blog posts, but the research that's required, the inputs that are required, the time that's required to put it all together is significant. So producing content at scale is really hard. But that's where you can have us enter with Pearl Lemon's content growth machine. Okay, that's ultimately where we can step in and really change the game for you when it comes to our 500k Blitz, which is producing 500,000 words of content on your website to explode the amount of traffic, to increase the amount of inquiries, marketing opt-ins, e-commerce checkouts, and money basically to your website. The 500k Blitz. So let's get into some of the technical elements of what's involved and what we do effectively. So I want to talk through the technology stack, because sometimes people don't necessarily recognize that there's a lot of tech and there's a lot of strategic elements that go into this. Okay, so this is just not all of the tools, but some of the tools that we use when figuring out what are the most appropriate keywords for your site. And I'm going to put another one in there because there's even more, and we could continue. Okay, so you've got Hrefs. Just to run you through these, Hrefs is one of the, like, it's the Nike of the SEO world when it comes to looking at websites. And you've got SEMrush, which has probably got the biggest keyword database in the world as far as we know. Ahrefs and SEMrush are always battling there, but these are the two titans of the SEO world. Then we use keywords everywhere. You might be more familiar with Surfer SEO, but it's a keyword plugin that is fantastic for, and let me just show you an example. Google Eat Update. It gives you all of this stuff on the right hand side to help the generation or the content ideation and generation of additional words. People always ask for long tail keywords, and this takes information from Google's content planner, as well as a couple of other sources. Then we've got phrase.io. So let's just open up phrase.io so you can see the best SEO content optimization tool and AI writer. We use the content optimization element of it. Research, write, optimize content that ranks first on Google in minutes instead of hours. So we use this in combination with, and let's keep going. And there's many other tools that we do use. Market Muse, Page Optimizer Pro, which are keyword and page optimization tools. We use Grammarly, Hemingway app, WordPress, Rank Map, Google Trends, Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Search Console to ultimately work through the whole strategy behind producing your content. So this is the technology stack that we use, okay? Now I want to talk about the writing process, okay? So this is really how it works in general. So let's just change that also. That is what that means. That was what that's meant to say here. So we'll have the client discovery process, and depending upon where we are at in the journey, we'll have that call with you, and we'll talk about this ultimately space. We'll talk about how the process works, and from that, as a consequence, we'll typically have a little bit of education where we work you through the strategy, the thinking, why it makes sense, and what we do. And then we get into the competitor analysis, where you'll identify some of the main competition for us. You'll identify exactly who it is that potentially we should consider from a pure play competitive process as well as a pure play Google process. And the competition on Google might be separate to your direct competitors, but we'll get a smattering of both. Alongside that, we'll then engage in keyword research using some of the elements from from the 500k technology stack, but we'll also use and draw other sources such as Quora, such as Answer the Public. There's another one. Is it Ask or Ask the? Here we go. Yep, it's Answer the Public. I beg your pardon. We'll use Answer the Public as well. And we'll go through ultimately keyword research using all of those tools as well as our own initiative to put together the initial development of initial keyword list. Okay, we'll then send that to you to generate an initial review. And from there, we'll make adjustments as necessary, as and when you determine things need to be adjusted or tweaked. And from that, we'll ultimately then develop the finalized keyword list. Now, depending upon whether we're doing the 500k Blitz or we're doing one of the slightly smaller packages, we'll build the initial list, we'll share it with you, and then based upon how we later down the line, and we'll come to talk about this, the publishing process and the review process, how that performs, we might then make continual adjustments, okay? So once we've got the finalized keyword list, we then hand it over to our team for content writing allocation, because this requires a tour de force of writers. Luckily, we're producing well over 1 million words a month across our clients as well as internally. So we're ready and set, and those numbers may well have changed by the time you see this. Okay, so once we've got the content writing allocation part down, we then head over to content planning, because we allocate the writers and then we start planning out the actual writing itself and schedule it with the relevant writers so we can fit it into our roster of amazing client and internal content that we need to produce. Once that is all sorted, we get onto the initial content production. Okay, so we'll produce a couple of pieces. We'll make sure that they feel like they're a brand fit and fit for the website. We'll share that with yourself. Depending upon the relationship we have with you, we may skip that part and head straight to the publishing process, but we'll ultimately share some of those pieces with you for approval. We get the framework and the style and the way that we're producing content approved, and then we get on with the actual content writing itself. So subsequently, we then get on to the publishing process. Now, this is something that not everybody actually always considers when we're thinking about the actual production and blitz of this content. So we need to upload the content to WordPress or whatever CMS you might be using, or giving it to your development team. That content needs to be reviewed when it hits draft to see that it's been uploaded and imported correctly. We also need to consider the images, okay? All of the content needs images. The content needs to be ultimately image optimized, so there's relevancy of images versus the content that we produce. And that might be something that we work on with you. That might be something that you provide. And there's a conversation that we have around that, which relates to the all other to otherwise. And then we often sometimes need to discuss any limitations with sourcing of the images and how that's going to work. And that's always easy enough to solve. Then there's working around IPs, because we'll have different members of the team accessing the website. Maybe the content team come in, maybe our development team come in, maybe our graphic design team come in. And because we're a remote first team, we've got people coming in and we need to do some various IP whitelisting to make sure that we can get access. The content is then optimized via rank math on the websites if it's WordPress, or we'll look at relevant and adjacent tools depending upon the CMS. And then we start going through all of those elements that relate to the Pearl Lemon differentiation. We'll look at internal linking structure. We'll look at meta tags. We'll look at EXIF data. We'll look at alternative text. We'll look at the actual anchor text that we use. We'll look at FAQ. We'll look at the actual content schema for that actual page. So if we're doing SEO with you, for you, we'll then combine the content that we produce with optimizing all of that content to ensure that we punch above our weight when it comes to our ability to rank that content. And that's the difference, the Pearl Lemon difference ultimately, that we can leverage that many content teams simply can't. We're SEO led in nature and we understand a thing or two about content as well. So that content is either scheduled or immediately published, depending upon the publishing process that we discovered. And then we can check it once it goes live. Are there any errors? Are there any links broken? What about the URL structure? Are the internal links working properly? Are the page loads all okay? Once that's all set up and sorted, we repeat the process. So moving forward from that, the actual review process is something that's also important to the whole campaign. So every 50K words, we will begin a little bit of a review process to check upon the content performance. So we'll look at your Google Analytics traffic, we'll look at Google Search Console, and we'll identify ultimately top performing pages, how many keywords you're beginning to get additional impressions for, what is that doing in terms of rankings overall, how is that being reflected in tools such as Ahrefs and SEMrush or other relevant SEO performance tools, as well as identifying some of the top performing pieces for the website. So then we can adjust based upon what we're seeing work, any of the content planning or content publishing based upon the performance to date. And what we'll do with that is that we'll edit some of the top performing pages where the performance can improve even further to leverage the old Pareto principle that 20% of the content will leverage 80% of the results. And the more content that you have, the bigger that 20% piece is. Think about that. The more content you have, the bigger the 20% performance piece is. And then if there's any issues with low performing content where it's not quite getting the visibility that we want, we'll jump in, we'll make some edits, we'll play with internal linking structure and see what we can do to get the best wholesale result. So results, now that we're talking about results that you should expect to see. So from a visual perspective, you should expect to see 750 to 1250 word pieces containing frequently asked questions based upon the research that we've done from SEMrush, Ahrefs, Answer the Public, and otherwise. Content going live once per day. We typically get to this place after getting through the initial 30 days of setup and planning. You'll also see content that's optimized for mobile as well as for desktop, content with relevant images, and overall a really optimized looking blog. So now let's get to the really interesting part, which is the return on investment. So you should begin to see after the first 30 to 60 days, 5 to 10% growth in monthly traffic. We hope for more than that. In few cases, it's less, but typically this is what we see or more, 5 to 10% growth in monthly traffic because we're going through that huge content drive, okay? The next thing that you should see over 6 months is a significant increase in inquiries to the website because over a 6-month period from the point of publishing, we should have produced anything to the effect of 180,000 words, depending upon if we're publishing once per day. If you publish once per day, assuming 1,000 words per day, then over 180 days, it's 180,000 words of content. And if we take the 80-20 rule, then 36,000 words of that content, which could be spread across, for example, 36 blogs of the 180 blogs, we should see some really outsized performance. So that's something that you should expect to see. That should be a significant increase in inquiries to the website. Now, those inquiries could range from general questions as related to your area, as well as actual B2B inquiries. The next thing you should see is ultimately a conversation about potentially reinvesting all your multi-channel marketing efforts, because you may well be doing PPC, cold email, LinkedIn, cold calling, running ad campaigns across social media, all the things which we do at Pearl Lemon. So if that's something you want to discuss with us, then absolutely we should. But there will be a real conversation around accelerating or increasing your investment into this space because we have seen some ridiculous results from this work. We have seen ourselves personally, after 6 years of doing SEO, having our best summer ever in terms of inquiries because of the sheer content production that we've taken our collection of websites on. It's a road that we're only continuing down. We are now doing 500K blitzes for over a dozen of our clients. It works because the logic supporting it and the level of investment that we've made into our internal team, it just really means that it's very difficult, or it would be very unusual if this failed. Very, very unusual. So I hope that this makes sense, and I hope that it gives you a really keen insight into the 500K blitz for Pearl Lemon. Thank you so much.